What's up everybody, Ratchet Davo here for another video, and I'm using a different camera. I normally use the GoPro, so I'm trying something a little different. But today is the day that I pull the motor out of the 370. I'm going to bring the transmission out with it, so should be fairly simple, but I'm going to kind of, for people who don't normally pull engines, it's pretty easy. I'm going to disconnect the drive shaft from underneath the car. I'm going to disconnect the transmission from the vehicle, so there's a little transmission brace underneath, and I'm going to disconnect that. Disconnect the motor mounts, and then I should be pretty much ready to go ahead and pull the motor up and out a little bit. And the reason I'm only going to be doing this in a few small steps is because I've already taken the steps to get the exhaust off and to get the engine harness out of the way. So it's fairly simple past that. I'm sure I'm going to run into some issues. There's some stuff in the harness back here that I'm going to have to take apart, so I'm going to work through that. But I'm pretty excited to finally get the engine out of this thing. I am going to drain the oil and the trans fluid while I'm at it, but this thing has been sitting for far too long, and it's time to give it the attention that it needs. So without further ado, let's jump right in. Alright folks, so I've gotten the exhaust completely gone, drive shaft is out. I still have some of the wiring to mess with, but what I have to do first, and what you need to do before anything else, there's a starter that you're going to want to remove, and I have a feeling I can probably leave the starter. I just need to at least get the wiring off the starter. The other thing that you have to do, you never want to forget when pulling a motor and a trans, is the shifter. You want to remove the shifter out of here. So I'm going to remove this piece here, and that'll expose the shifter and what's underneath, and then we can dive into at least removing it, so that when you're pulling the transmission out, obviously this ain't gonna work when you're pulling it out that way. So let me get some tools and we'll get started with that. Alright, first thing you want to do when removing the shifters, you want to get up under the car. And I apologize that I don't have a lift or anything in my garage, and it's gonna be hard to see, but I'll try to do my best to show y'all. There's this plastic cover. You want to remove this rubber cover, excuse me. Then there's a 12 millimeter here. You're going to undo that 12 millimeter, because once you get to the top of the car to undo the shifter up there, you can kind of slide the shifter right out and this bracket will fall. That's kind of what you're going for. So remove that 12 millimeter. It's not hard to do. Once you do that, you can go to the top of the car with it. Alright, so the actual shifter bracket here is removed. The only thing you have to do now is I believe there's 4 bolts up top that you want to make sure, and that pushes the actual shifter portion of it. You can pull that right out, and then this will fall, if I'm not mistaken, and you can have that separate. The other option is you can just take the whole wide bracket, but you can't actually get to the top bolts with the transmission on the car, so this is the secondary way to do that once you drop that transmission brace. So we're going to do that next. Go back to the top of the car. I apologize. That's kind of what you have to do. Let me put this bolt away. And back to inside the car, where we will attempt to remove. I haven't even sat in this car in months. It saddens me. So that you can see the shifter's already got some play in it. And I probably should have waited to remove that so I could get the shift knob off. Still should be able to either way. I didn't put the shift knob on too tight. Use that. By the way, I'll never own another shift knob in this car. This is by far the best. I had it on my Z32 and I have it on this car, and I'll take it off and put it on the next car. Okay, the next thing, you just gotta just pull up on this little piece here, and it'll pull out, and you got one connector there. I'm gonna try to just leave that to the side here for a minute. You got more rubber you got to deal with, and if I'm not mistaken, you got 4 bolts on this. You got one in each corner here, and they're 10 millimeters. You want to pull those 4 off, and that'll take the whole shifter assembly out of here, or loose, and that should be that. Now I don't know why I couldn't pull all of this off together. I wish I could take this boot off, but I think I'll be able to once I get these 10 millimeters off. So yeah, 4 10 mils, and then once I get that done, I'll show you what it's like underneath this rubber and what you need to do. Alright, y'all, I apologize, it's getting a little bit dark, but I'm ready to unbolt the motor mounts and the trans mounts. You saw me take the shifter off. I kind of talked about getting the drive shaft out. I drained the oil out of the car, the motor, and I don't have the right tool to drain the trans fluid, but I'm hoping that I won't have too many issues with that. Sometimes when you start angling the and I'll show you once I get there, but once you start angling the motor to get it out with the transmission, sometimes you run into oil spilling out, so hopefully that doesn't happen. But some of the wiring back here is still hooked up, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to move the engine forward in the transmission, and that'll help me kind of be able to unhook that stuff back there. There's probably 4 or 5 things, and I got to undo the starter wiring real quick, which is down there, that wire right there. Once I do that, this thing is ready to come out, and I'm excited to get it out of here. Alright guys, sorry it got dark last night and I kind of stopped after the time lapse, so it's the next day, but you can see there's no more VQ37VHR in here, and I kind of zip tied up the harness. I'm going to eventually degrease and maybe paint the engine bay. You know, everybody says they're going to do that, but definitely want this to look nice. If something else is going back in it, we shall see. But here's just a look at it real quick. That is pretty clean. I'm pretty happy with it. So I will be making another video. This will be the end of this video, but I'll be unbolting the transmission and going through all that jazz. So there'll be another video on that. But for now, that was the uninstall of the motor. There's one thing I forgot to mention. When you have a manual transmission car and you're pulling the motor and transmission together, do not forget about the slave cylinder. Detach that. Don't forget about that. There was a harness. The body harness was attached to the back of the motor, which was a pain in the butt to get out, and that took a little bit longer. But overall, yeah, fairly simple, and it was fairly simple, but it was a pain in the butt. But it's done. So thanks for watching, y'all, and I'll catch y'all in the next video.